Hi, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 24 books that I want to read in 2024. I've chosen 12 fiction books and 12 non-fiction books, and there will be timestamps to all 24 of the books in the description box. This channel is all about re-education and decolonizing the mind. So I tried as much as possible to make this list very diverse, including authors from all around the world. The first book I want to talk about is Buenosayres. This is written by Leopoldo Marechal, who is an author from Argentina. The story takes place in 1920s Buenos Aires and follows a young male protagonist who over the course of 3 days undergoes a spiritual awakening or enlightenment. I skimmed the first few pages of this book and I really enjoyed Marechal's writing style. He writes in a very poetic and lyrical writing style, and for me it allowed me to be fully encaptured and engulfed in the story. The next novel I want to talk about is Invisible Man, which was written by Ralph Ellison, who was an African-American author. The novel tells a story of a nameless black man who is treated as if he is invisible, or a non-being. Readers follow this invisible man on a journey which is full of strange and sometimes extraordinary events. One edition of this book described it as an epic of modern American Negro life. This book is a reread for me. I actually read it in high school, and after I finished, it became my favorite novel of all time. I remember when reading the book, I felt that Ellison really did a good job of explaining feelings and exasperations that I didn't quite know how to put into words. The protagonist has real intellectual depth, and because of that, he's very eloquently able to articulate a lot of the issues that plague him. The next book I want to talk about is War and Peace by famous Russian author Leo Tolstoy. War and Peace has been referred to as the greatest novel of all time by notable authors including Ivan Turgenev and Virginia Woolf. The story takes place during the Napoleonic Wars, specifically looking at Napoleon Bonaparte's invasion of Russia in 1812. The book follows almost 600 characters, all of whom are impacted by the war in various ways. I will finish by quoting Virginia Woolf's assessment of War and Peace, where she says, "If you think of the novels which seem to you great novels, you think of all sorts of things, of religion, of love, of war, of peace, of family, of balls in county towns, of sunsets, moonrises, the immortality of the soul. There is hardly any subject of human experience that is left out of War and Peace. This same monumental and comprehensively detailed quality of War and Peace has inspired characterizations of the masterpiece as the great book of life, even life itself." The next novel I want to talk about is An Orchestra of Minorities, written by Nigerian author Chigozie Obioma. The story follows a young poultry farmer on an epic journey that spans continents as well as earthly and cosmic spaces. The story is a contemporary retelling of Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey. However, Obioma uses myths and stories within the Igbo literary tradition, and the Igbo are a tribe within Nigeria. This book has been on my TBR ever since it came out in 2019. I read Obioma's first novel, The Fisherman, a few years ago and really enjoyed it, and I'm very curious to see what he does with a novel that is on this sort of epic scale. The next novel I want to talk about is Ceremony, written by Leslie Marmon Silko, who is an Indigenous author. The novel tells the story of a young Indigenous man who went to fight in World War II and returns back to America feeling completely disillusioned. He brings readers with him on his journey to learn more about his Indigenous cultures and traditions, hoping to seek solace in the traditional customs of his tribe. I have been really wanting to read more literature by Indigenous authors, so I am very excited to give this a read in 2024. The next book I want to talk about is Layli and Majnun, and it's written by 12th century Persian poet Nizami. This is an epic poem that tells the story of two lovers whose relationship is prevented from blossoming due to their families, but whose passion for one another continues despite this. I was reading an essay recently that was saying that the status of this story in the Islamic world is comparable to the status of Romeo and Juliet in the West. The next book I want to talk about is called Time Shelter, and it's written by Georgi Gospodinov, who is a Bulgarian author. This novel won the 2023 International Man Booker Prize, which is awarded to the finest piece of literature that has been translated into the English language. The novel has a very interesting premise. In the novel, a clinic for the past has been created for those who suffer from Alzheimer's. In the clinic, each floor reproduces a particular decade in time in minute detail, which allows those who suffer from Alzheimer's to visit the floor and have their memory refreshed about that particular time period. All is going well until people who don't have memory issues want to visit the clinic as sort of a pastime to escape from the mundanity of life. However, this ends up resulting in unexpected consequences when the present and the past collide. This is all that I know about this novel, but its idea and premise sounds really interesting, so that is why it is also on my list of books to read in 2024. The next book I want to talk about is The Aleph and Other Stories. This is a collection of short stories by Jorge Luis Borges, who was an author from Argentina. This is a very interesting collection of stories dealing with a range of characters, including an unrepentant Nazi, an imprisoned Mayan priest, fanatical Christian theologians, and a man awaiting his assassin. I've heard a lot of people say that Borges is their favorite author from Argentina, so I really wanted to give this short story collection a read in 2024. The next book I want to talk about is Jagua, written by Cyprian Ekwensi, who was an author from Nigeria. The novel follows a woman living a life of hedonism in 1960s Nigeria, full of parties, wild nights, men, and fights. The protagonist is described as rushing from one experience to another in search of something she can't quite grasp. I'm really interested to read Ekwensi's work, and this is said to be his most famous novel. I was watching an interview recently, and they compared the work of Ekwensi to that of F. Scott Fitzgerald. Specifically, the focus on the rustle and bustle of a major city, in this case being Lagos. The next novel I want to talk about is Faust, written by Goethe, who was a German author. This one I'm just going to read the back of the book because I think it summarizes the plotline perfectly. Faust, a scholar, finds himself in the midst of despair, realizing that his worldly pursuits and studies have been a farce. It's then that he makes a pact with Mephistopheles, who promises to serve Faust, grant his every wish, and give him purpose again, a virtual heaven on earth. There's just one catch. Upon Faust's death, it will be he who will serve, in hell. In one of the greatest works of German literature, Goethe explores the human need for meaning and the desire for power over one's own fate, regardless of the consequences. I really enjoy novels like this. I find it fascinating to see what characters who are able to do whatever they wish choose to do with their lives, and whether it actually ends up bringing satisfaction. Please let me know in the comments if anyone has read Faust before. I'm currently looking for a good edition of the book, and I am very much open for recommendations. The next novel I want to talk about is We, written by Yevgeny Zamyatin. This is a dystopian novel where citizens of a totalitarian state are forced to live lives devoid of passion and creativity. That is until D503, a mathematician who thinks in numbers, discovers that he has a soul. Honestly, that is all that I know about this novel, but I heard that it was very much an inspiration for George Orwell's 1984, so I'd be fascinated to see where Orwell got some of his inspiration from. The next book I want to talk about is The Conference of the Birds, which is an epic poem written in the 12th century by Persian poet Attar. I honestly don't know a lot about this poem, but from what I understand, it's all about the birds searching for a leader. This appears to be an allegory for man's search for meaning. So now that I've finished the fiction books, it's time to move on to nonfiction. The first book I want to talk about is Culture and Imperialism, which was written by Palestinian author Edward Said. This is a collection of essays that looks at how Western imperialism used literature to dominate other cultures. Specifically, Said looks at how 19th and 20th century literature and mass media were used as weapons of domination. Said also looked at the use of the voices of the oppressed in order to liberate themselves from Western imperialism. The next book I want to talk about is Thomas Sankara Speaks. This is a selection of writing and interviews by Thomas Sankara. Sankara was a military officer and Marxist revolutionary who served as president of Burkina Faso from 1983 until he was assassinated in 1987. As president, Sankara saw his first task as eliminating the effects of colonialism. I'm really interested to read this book as I've been wanting to learn a lot more about Thomas Sankara and what happened in Burkina Faso after he became president. I know that Sankara believed it was very important to eliminate the effects of colonialism. He also rejected all foreign aid and nationalized land and mineral wealth. I'm hoping that this collection will allow me to have a much better understanding of who Sankara was as a person and what his beliefs and ideologies were. The next book I want to talk about is Close to Home by Christine Delphy. This book is a study of how patriarchy affects women in their families. Specifically, Delphy looks at how women are economically exploited by men who benefit from the unpaid labor that women disproportionately take on in the home. I came across Delphy recently as she has a really interesting book that looks at the impact of the war on terror in women, specifically looking at the 2011 ban of the Muslim veil in France, and I decided that I wanted to read some of her earlier works before jumping into this newer book. The next book I want to talk about is Upside Down, which was written by Eduardo Galeano, who is a writer and journalist from Uruguay. This book is described as an eloquent and passionate exposé of first world assumptions and privileges. I just want to read a quote from the author. Galeano writes, "We've accepted a reality we should reject, one where poverty kills, people are hungry, machines are more precious than humans, and children work from dark to dark. In the North, we are fed on a diet of artificial need, and all made the same by things we own. The South is the galley slave, enabling our greed." I came across Galeano recently as I was looking for books about the history of Latin America, and he has written a mammoth trilogy called Memories of Fire, which I hope to read in the future, in addition to another book, Open Veins of Fire, which looks at 5 centuries of pillaging Latin America. I decided that before I jumped into those longer works, I wanted to give this shorter work a read. The next book I want to talk about is Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, who was a Brazilian educator. I really enjoy reading Bell Hook's work, and she frequently mentions Freire and his ideas and concepts around consciousness raising. So I decided it was finally time to give this book a read. In the book, Freire argues that traditional teaching styles keep the poor powerless, as they're treated as passive recipients of knowledge. Instead, Freire argues that educators should teach critical thinking skills, which will result in empowerment and liberation of the oppressed. The next book I want to talk about is The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, who was from Martinique. This book is an analysis of the psychology of the colonized and their path to liberation. Fanon looks at the rage of colonized people and the use of violence in spurring change. The next book I want to talk about is A Small Place, written by Jamaica Kincaid, who is from Antigua. This is essentially an extended essay that looks at Antigua and the role of colonization and tourism on the island. I've been wanting to read Kincaid's work for a number of months now, and I also will be traveling to Antigua shortly, so I figured that this would be a good introduction to her work and also to learn a little bit more about the island before I travel there. The next book I want to talk about is Negroland by Margaret Jefferson, who is an African-American author. This book is considered to be part memoir, part meditation on race, gender, and class. In the book, Jefferson speaks of her upbringing and education among the upper class of the Black elite. She also looks at how historical movements such as the feminist movement and the civil rights movement affected the Black upper class. I'm really looking forward to reading this book, as Jefferson has a very unique writing style. One critic referred to her style as mischievous and provocative. I'm also interested to see how Jefferson chooses to tackle this genre of memoir. Now switching gears a little bit, I'm going to talk about some philosophical texts. The first work of philosophy I want to talk about is The Laws by Plato. This was Plato's last dialogue, and it's also a dialogue I don't hear a lot of people talking about, but as a lawyer, this is the dialogue that interests me the most. I've been reading the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, and in that book, Aristotle talks about the way to create a virtuous person is through using the law. Plato seems to agree, and in this dialogue, he looks at how law can create moral salvation in society. Specifically, Plato calls the law the dispensation of reason. So I'm very interested to see what Plato thought about the law and how it can be used as an instrument for change in society. The next book I want to talk about is Essays by Montaigne, who was a French philosopher. I'm a very big fan of essay collections, and from what I can see, Montaigne single-handedly popularized this literary form. This is a huge book, with essays ranging in topics as varied as love, friendship, religion, politics, and poetics. The next book I want to talk about is Capital by Karl Marx, who was a German philosopher. This is Marx's seminal work which outlines his entire system of economics. I've been wanting to learn more about communism for a very long time now. I've read the Communist Manifesto as well as State and Revolution by Lenin, but I know what I really need to take my knowledge to the next level is to finally tackle this work. I've been very nervous to dig into it. It is in 3 volumes, and the first volume alone is over 1,000 pages, but I'm really hoping that I can get through volume 1 in 2024. The last book I want to talk about is The Perennial Philosophy, which is written by Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley was the writer of Brave New World, a dystopian novel, but I'm really interested in his nonfiction writing. In this book, Huxley examines the spiritual beliefs of a number of different religions, including Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity. Thanks so much for watching my video where I talk about the 24 books I want to read in 2024. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or if now any of these are on your TBR also. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you like content like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can keep seeing my content. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.